So we put out some segments on our YouTube from an upcoming episode where we talk about aliens. Again, because we did an episode on aliens, but there's never enough to say about aliens.
So much
the
to
people
say.
need to know
They
exist. They need to know.
They have to know.
So obviously, you know, there's people inquiring, you know. Well, what do I research if I want to know about aliens and want some evidence that they do exist? So I thought it'd be good to do this segment and offer everyone some people of interest.
Right, yeah.
Or articles of interest to look into.
It's a good idea.
When you're doing your alien, UFO, UAP, all of it, research. So that's when Bob Lazar came to mind.
Yeah, I had a feeling Bob Lazar was about to pop up. I had a feeling, yeah.
But obviously that's more your field to talk about, so I wanted to get you to talk about Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar. Robert Lazar. Yeah, we spoke about him a bit on episode 1.
We did.
Yeah, he's like we said then, he's one of those names that if you're doing this type of research, alien research, extraterrestrial activity, UFOs, UAPs, alien technology in general, he's probably going to come up pretty quickly because he's quite a famous name in this space. People know him. He's been speaking for quite some time about what he's seen, what he's worked on, so on and so forth. Since the 80s, we're talking. He's been on various documentaries, podcasts, etc., etc. So he is a name that you're gonna come across pretty quickly. Our teacher wrote about him quite some years ago. There's a book which we mentioned on that episode as well called "Are the UFOs in Our Midst?" And this is a good book it's a good book to read. I recommend it. I'm not sure you'll be able to get a hold of it now. If you can, I definitely recommend reading it because it's just going to give you real world happenings as pertains to this topic, as pertain to this subject. You're going to get names like Bob Lazar. You're going to get names like Edward Teller, who was involved in Bob Lazar working for the government. You're going to get names like Kenneth Arnold, Billy Myers, so on and so forth, and Baba Yaga. He really just takes us through and just explains, okay, yeah, this is what they saw, this is what was true, this is what was happening, so on and so forth. So as far as this topic, I highly recommend the book. You're going to get, Baba Yaga speaks in that book about the fact that crafts were sighted directly over the White House. And we said that in episode 1 too. Just chilling over the White House. It's chilling. And this was in the 50s. So I think President Eisenhower was in power, and yeah, he explains exactly what happened there. A book like Are the UFOs in Our Midst and a book called Man from Planet Risk. Good books.
Great
for this.
Books.
Obviously, books written in a previous school of thought, so we're in a modern or more modern school of thought now, the hereafter, where he's writing books titled The Actual Facts and The Part of That, so on and so forth. But yeah,
Master Secrets.
But still pertinent nonetheless when it comes to this topic, as far as extraterrestrials, aliens, and some of the things that have been cited over the years, and so on and so forth. So he goes into various things which we should be able to dig up and go into at different points in time. But Robert Lazar, he was hired by the Department of Intelligence. Edward Teller, like I mentioned, which is another name you can search up, which is involved in this as well. Edward Teller is known as the father of the hydrogen bomb. So, he's an interesting name as well. But he was hired by the government to study and essentially reverse engineer UFOs or crafts that had crash landed into the planet. So what Baba Yaga explained is that the project was called Project Galileo. And you had different crafts that had crashed into the planet at different times, if that makes sense. And he was the one that he was hired to study these crafts, and essentially find out how this technology could be used to benefit the US government, which sounds like what the US government would do.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sounds about right. So he released reports and has been speaking about it for quite some time. He released reports on the measurements of the crafts, the technology of the crafts, and what he saw, and so on and so forth. He spoke about how these crafts were designed for beings no taller than children. He spoke about some of the technology they was working on. This is why when it comes to element number 115, and why it's so important. And he came out and said, yo, these ships are running on element 115. And we always say, and I think we said on the first episode as well, and I'm always saying it to anyone who I'm dialoguing with on this topic, make sure you have your scientific foundation. too, you know, because science is going to come in at some point on your studies, and you need to have at least a basic understanding of atoms and elements, so on and so forth. Element 115 is quite famously known as the alien element because of what Bob Lazar said. So he said that these crafts were able to manipulate gravity, so on and so forth, and they were being powered by element 115, which doesn't occur naturally on this planet. So either you're dealing with beings who have synthesized such an element to that degree where they know how to use it, or you're dealing with beings who have come from a planet where it occurs naturally. But element 115 doesn't occur naturally on this planet. And he came out saying, yeah, element 115. This is back in the 80s. So I don't think the element was synthesized until 2003.
Yeah.
Or got on record as having been synthesized until 2003. And it wasn't put on the periodic table until 2015, 2016, something like that. Right. So when he came out in the 80s, like, these ships are running on element 115, people was, what are you talking about? Government came out like, boy, I've never seen this Bob Lazar guy in my life. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he's talking about. We didn't hire him.
So it was essentially a whistleblower. Yeah, he was meant to keep it quiet.
He was meant to keep it quiet.
When he started saying things, they came out like, you know what? We don't even know this guy.
Yeah, we don't know who he is or what he's on about. But no, Area 51,
As they do.
Yes, as they do. So he came out with his stories, and he essentially said, yeah, element 115 is pertinent as well to make you understand a little bit about atoms and how they work, understand a little bit about synthesizing atoms, just so that when someone, because I find as well, when you're discussing this and you say something like, yeah, he spoke about element 115, some people automatically just switch off, like, because their brains are elements 115, you know. So it's important to have that understanding and that overstanding, at least on a basic level, so that when someone says element 115, you know what they're saying. Essentially what we're saying is that, you know, when you deal with technology such as particle accelerators, hadron colliders, these technologies can be used to synthesize elements. So they'll fire one element or one atom into another atom in order to attempt at least to create a heavier element. So if you're number 115 on the table, that's quite a heavy element. You know, you've gone all the way to 115, you know, starting from 1, which is hydrogen, so on and so forth. So important to have that understanding. Yeah, and he came out and he said, yep, it's running on that. I've seen things. He said other things as well. So I would certainly recommend looking into him and watching some of his interviews, see what he's saying. You know, he spoke about technologies that he's seen. He took other people to see the crafts. They were out in the desert. He said, yeah, let's stand from a distance and watch. I think they found out that he was doing that. They took him, debriefed him, but he came out publicly. Probably one of the reasons he did so was for protection as well. So now if something happens to Bob Lazar, everyone's gonna be like, huh? You see, I knew it. At this point, it's pretty safe. So yeah, it was way back then that our teacher spoke about him. And he's just one of many names. I've mentioned other names. You know, you've got Kenneth Arnold, who saw UFOs. You've got Admiral Byrd, who was a very interesting one. So yeah, Bob Lazar, I recommend looking into him, but don't stop there. Dive into certain other names, and hopefully we can drop a couple other names.
Yeah, I think we can.
No, but that's a little bit about Bob Lazar.
Yeah.